The crystalline throne room of the Zephyrian Empire fell silent as the human prisoner was dragged before Queen Zelora. Her 4 arms remained perfectly still, each adorned with the ceremonial rings of conquest that had subjugated 17 star systems. The bioluminescent patterns across her azure skin pulsed in slow, measured rhythms, a display of absolute control that had intimidated countless species into submission. But this human was different. Captain Marcus Chun stood between 2 towering Zephyrian guards, his military uniform torn and bloody from the battle that had claimed his ship. Yet his dark eyes held no fear, no desperation. Instead, he looked directly at her with something she had never encountered in 2 centuries of rule: genuine curiosity. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady despite the translation collar around his neck sparking with alien technology. "I've heard stories about the great Queen Xylera across the galaxy. They say you've conquered more worlds than any ruler in history. The Queen's secondary heart's organs that regulate emotional responses in her species began an irregular flutter. No prisoner had ever addressed her with such respect. They usually cowered, begged, or raged. This human simply observed her as if she were a fascinating puzzle to solve." "Silence," commanded General Vex, her chief military advisor. His scarred exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's ethereal lighting. "You will show proper submission before the Eternal Queen." Marcus glanced at the general, then back to Xylera. "With respect, General, I wasn't addressing you." His gaze returned to the Queen, and something unprecedented happened. Queen Xylera felt her breath catch. "I was speaking to her." The emphasis on the last word sent an unexpected shock through her nervous system. Not "Your Majesty" or the Queen, or any of the dozen titles her subjects used. Simply her, as if she were a person, not just a position. "You dare," General Vex began, but Xylera raised one of her primary hands, halting him mid-sentence. "Let him speak," she commanded, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her royal lineage. But internally, her thoughts raced. Why was this human affecting her so strangely? Her biomonitors should have detected any chemical weapons or psychic interference, yet her cardiac systems continued their erratic rhythm. Marcus took a step forward, and remarkably, the guards allowed it. "May I ask you something, Your Majesty?" Not as a prisoner to his captor, but as one leader to another. The question itself was revolutionary. No one had ever acknowledged her as anything beyond an absolute monarch to be feared. The concept of speaking leader to leader implied equality and notion that should have enraged her. Instead, she found herself leaning forward slightly on her throne. "Speak," she said simply. "Why do you conquer? What drives someone to seek dominion over the stars themselves?" The throne room erupted in outraged chittering and clicking from her assembled court. Several advisors demanded immediate execution for such impudence, but Xylera barely heard them. The question cut through layers of protocol and pretense, reaching something deep within her she had forgotten existed. For a moment, she was not the Eternal Queen. She was Xylera, a young princess, who had once dreamed of exploring distant worlds, not conquering them, who had wanted to understand the universe, not control it. Double quote she began, then stopped. When had she last been asked about her motivations rather than simply obeyed? "I sought to bring order to chaos, to unite the galaxy under one rule, ending the constant wars between species." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, a noble goal. "But tell me, when you look at the stars now, do you see the wonder you once felt, or do you only see territories yet to claim?" The question struck her like a plasma bolt to the chest. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered erratically, betraying emotions she had suppressed for decades. How could this human, this primitive being from a species that had barely achieved interstellar flight, see so clearly into her very soul? "Why are you looking at me like that?" she whispered, her voice losing its commanding harmonics. For the first time in a century, she sounded vulnerable. Marcus smiled, a gentle expression that seemed to illuminate something within her she thought had died long ago. "Like what, Your Majesty?" like you see me. Not the queen, not the conqueror, me. The captain's restraints hung loose on his wrists. The guards had forgotten to maintain their grip. So transfixed were they by this unprecedented exchange. Because you are more than your crown, aren't you? Beneath all this power and ceremony, you're someone who once looked at the stars and wondered what mysteries they held. Queen Xylora's hearts, all four of them, began racing in synchronization. For the first time since her coronation, the sensation was overwhelming, terrifying, and exhilarating. She had felt the pulse of dying stars, commanded fleets that blotted out suns, and held the fate of billions in her hands. Yet this one human's perception of her as an individual rather than an institution sent shockwaves through her very being. "Guards," she said suddenly, her voice ringing with renewed authority. "Release him, Your Majesty." General Vex stepped forward, his compound eyes wide with disbelief. "He is a prisoner of war. Protocol demands." "I am protocol," Xylora declared, rising from her throne. Her full height of 3 meters cast an imposing shadow, but her voice carried a warmth that had been absent for decades. "Captain Chun, would you do me the honor of joining me for a private audience? I find myself ... curious about your perspective on the cosmos." As the human was freed from his restraints, rubbing his wrist and offering her another of those disconcerting smiles, Queen Xyloa realized that perhaps conquest was not the only way to understand the universe. Perhaps, sometimes, it simply required seeing it through another's eyes that looked at her not with fear or awe, but with recognition of the person she had almost forgotten she could be. For the first time in over a century, the Eternal Queen of the Zephyrian Empire felt truly, magnificently alive.